Hey everybody, I wanted to answer the question of does digital media work, as well as if traditional is broken. Now, a lot of times people get fascinated by Facebook ads, or they see some posts about SEO and getting to the top of Google as if that's going to change business. But in reality, it's really simple. Not much has changed in marketing over the last 100 years, with the exception of where we distribute attention and how to convert and measure. And the measurement is probably one of the biggest things. If you went back to the 1920s as an example, when they introduced radio, people would call and said, hey, when you're going to test the airwave, do you mind mentioning my business? We now call that today, if an influencer does it on social media, we call that influencer marketing. But that's a principle that existed back almost 100 years ago now. So what I want to do today is compare traditional versus digital to show you the overlap, what you need to measure, and most importantly, how to think about campaigns holistically and how to tie together traditional and digital. The first thing to think about, in the old days of marketing, it really came down to reach. How could I leverage platforms to reach as many people as possible, most cost effectively? Now, the challenge is, up until digital, we could really only measure based on the number of impressions. So how many people drove by the billboard sign, or how many tuned into the radio program or watched TV that night. So most of marketing was calculated based on the total audience potential size, the number of impressions of the people actually tuned in or drove by, and then we would do some ad recall tests to figure out what's the level of awareness that that particular ad created. Now, there was no real direct way to figure out what it was. We strictly tried to measure traffic. Now, when Google came along and started to capture data in Google Analytics, we could finally measure what type of impressions we had, the awareness level, and traffic. And now with more and more platforms like Facebook and video ads and YouTube, we can get really granular on how many people we've reached, but also how much traffic has not necessarily been generated to just our store, but we can measure how many people visited our site. Now, a few years ago, both Google and Facebook came out with products that allowed us to measure physical store visits. So we could now really accurately attribute the effectiveness of ad campaigns down to both website and store traffic. And as we move through, we also started to have an opportunity to look at the type of actions or engagement people had with our content. So these all apply here. And they all apply here when we talk about new technologies. But what started to change is how we could measure the engagement. And when we got a step further, we could actually tie things back. Now, I will say, if companies used loyalty programs, like they have loyalty cards, they could actually connect the purchase data to the individual consumer and create traditional campaigns. But with digital, it's a lot more advanced on being able to model purchase behavior and start to influence the types of ads that they see. And we could create a greater degree of loyalty because we can serve them products and services that also match their suggestions. Now, done improperly, it will frustrate a lot of people, especially if you've been in a situation where you've purchased something, but you're still seeing ads for it. That's more of a setup thing, but you can tell the difference of how we can measure here. And the last part is referrals. I mean, most businesses, if you ask a business owner who's had their business for 20, 30 years, will tell you that the whole thing was built without having to advertise. It wasn't until recently that new players came in understanding how to actually use both of these to get customers through the door. But the interesting thing here when it came down to referrals is you just had better distribution through Google My Business or Facebook. Previously it was Yelp and a number of other sources, but they've pretty much been taken over by Google My Business. And we do have another video that explains that whole process, which we can link to below. But it's important to understand that both traditional and digital marketing have a place to play. It's just understanding how to line the two up and what to measure that makes a big difference. Knowing that both traditional and digital have these things in common, we can put together a measurement that allows you to look at what the cost is. And traditionally in media, they'll measure it by cost per 1,000 impressions. So this means that your ad or content has been served to 1,000 people. The next thing we want to look at is, as they advance, what was the cost per click? So they saw the ad, what did they do? Now, this measurement isn't available when we talk about traditional advertising. We're going to want to create a system that allows you to measure this. And this is the missing piece that most people forget or don't consider when they figure out how to blend the two. If you create a type of mechanism that you can measure, whether that's a custom phone number or a vanity URL, so it could be real estate 123. It's something people can really remember, and when they see a billboard or they hear it on the radio, that will help us track what did it take someone, so we got their attention, we advanced them, we can now measure that versus other forms of advertising. Once we go from there, we want to make sure we understand what our cost per lead is. Now this is really interesting because if you understand and stop here just at my cost per lead, you may be missing out on one of the most important things. Your most expensive lead might convert to a customer at a much higher level, and they might have a higher lifetime value. See, most people and most ad managers will stop at this level, but the single most important number in any business is the customer's lifetime value. Now, I would complement that by understanding the first purchase value, just so you can recoup and restore your cash flow. But it's most important because your lifetime value of a customer must be 3 to 5 times the customer acquisition cost. If you do that, you'll preserve enough margin to scale and continue to acquire clients through advertising and sales. You can also use these same things for tracking things like salespeople, measuring which sales come in, what their average cost per lead and lifetime value is. But if you look at these 5 numbers alone in your business, you can actually track both traditional and digital and map out the perfect funnel so that you can continue to invest in marketing properly. I hope you found this helpful.